Welcome to While We Were Distracted, the podcast where we explore topics that often get overshadowed in the rush of daily life. Please take a moment to like and subscribe, it really helps.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we dig into your sources to find the most mind-blowing stuff. Today we're tackling a topic that's really out there. Private aerospace companies, like the big names you know, government secrets, and, of course, the truth about UAPs. And you guys sent in some interviews with Luis Elizondo. He's a former Pentagon intelligence official. And from what we've seen, there could be some serious conflict brewing between all these powerful players. Let's get into it.
Yeah, Elizondo's background, it's really what jumps out right away. He wasn't just some random guy, you know. This guy was deep in the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program.
A-tip.
Yeah, exactly. A real Pentagon program, the real deal. And he was working in these ultra-secure facilities, SCIFs and SAPs, they call them. That's where they talk about all this super sensitive stuff.
SCIFs and SAPs. Sounds intense.
Like a vault within a vault, seriously. Layers of security clearances, protocols, the whole 9 yards. They exist to keep highly classified information under wraps, which is a lot more common than you might think, especially when you're dealing with intelligence and defense. But Elizondo, he claims that even inside these super secret spaces, ATIP was operating with a high level of rigor. They used data from a bunch of different sources, always trying to find, like, a normal explanation, you know, before considering anything extraordinary.
Makes sense, but it sounds like they were seeing stuff that just defied those normal explanations.
Exactly, and that's where the 5 observables come in.
5 observables.
These are the characteristics of UAPs that kept popping up again and again. Things like instantaneous acceleration, hypersonic velocity, low observability, and get this transmedium travel.
Transmedium travel.
And anti-gravity effects.
Whoa. Okay, so break that down for me. What does that actually look like? All that stuff.
So picture this. You've got an object that can just zoom, accelerate so fast it would crush any human pilot, speeds multiple times the speed of sound, all while staying practically invisible to radar. Oh, and then just for kicks, it can move seamlessly between air and water. Like, it's nothing. We're not talking about small jumps in technology here. This is like rewriting the laws of physics.
Yeah, no kidding. It sounds like science fiction, but Elizondo says it's real.
Right, and this is where things get even more interesting. Elizondo says that private companies, you know, the big ones, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, they had access to materials that might have been recovered from UAPs. And that raises some big questions about who really controls all of this potentially revolutionary technology.
Wait a minute. So these private companies could be sitting on technology that's light years ahead of anything we know about.
It's a big question, isn't it? I mean, the government, they often use contracts to fund research, bring in private companies, right?
Sure.
But then what happens when those companies end up with knowledge and tech that's so far beyond anything we've ever seen publicly?
Right, yeah. And Elizondo even tells this story about examining a piece of material, supposedly from a UAP. And this top aerospace company, he can't say who, they tried to copy it and ended up, get this, destroying a $1 million machine in the process. What do you make of that?
It's wild, right? It makes you think maybe these companies are working on a whole other level we can't even imagine. Think about what that means. Like, what if there are advancements in materials, energy, things we've never even dreamed of, and they're hidden from us? Who's benefiting from that?
That's a good question. And what about security risks? I mean, Elizondo seemed really worried about UAP sightings near military bases and nuclear facilities. He even called it preparation of the battle space, which is kind of scary, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it makes you wonder, if this tech, wherever it's from, can bypass our defenses so easily, what does that mean for, I don't know, our nuclear weapons? Are there vulnerabilities we haven't even considered because we just don't get what we're dealing with?
It's a lot to think about. But Elizondo also makes it clear he hasn't seen any proof of, like, hostile intent.
Right. Exactly. That's key. He recognizes the potential threat, but he's not jumping to conclusions about what's behind all this activity. It's a good reminder that we need to approach this with, I don't know, caution and a healthy dose of skepticism.
So we've got these private companies maybe sitting on game-changing technology, the government trying to figure out what it all means for national security. What happens next?
Well, this is where things get really interesting. Elizondo starts talking about how religious beliefs, like inside the Pentagon, were actually affecting the UAP investigations. He even said a colleague of his suggested these UAPs might be demonic.
Whoa, hold on, demons. That seems like a big leap.
It really shows this crazy clash between faith and science when people are trying to figure this stuff out. You've got some folks relying on religious teachings and interpretations,
Right.
and then others who are like, we need data, evidence, explanations, and you see this tension throughout Elizondo's whole story.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, how much of this is about control? Is it national security, corporate interests, or is it something deeper? Like, are we just afraid of the unknown?
It's a question we need to keep asking, for sure. And talking about control, Elizondo, he's got some strong opinions about how the government handles disclosure,
Hmm.
the balance between national security and the public's right to know. He even uses this phrase, catastrophic disclosure, to describe what could happen to society if the truth about UAPs got out.
So he's saying the truth is out there, but it's too dangerous to tell. Kind of contradictory, isn't it?
Well, Elizondo says he wants to work within the system, but he gets that there are ethical problems with all this government secrecy. He compares himself to Edward Snowden, says he's committed to following the rules for revealing information.
But wait, didn't he propose Operation Interloper? Wasn't that anything but by the book, using an aircraft carrier as bait to catch a UAP? Sounds like a movie plot.
Oh, totally a bold move. And it shows how frustrated he was with all the red tape. He says the plan got shut down because everyone kept information in their own little silos. No one was talking to each other.
But doesn't that make you even more worried? Like, if even the people deep in UAP research are missing pieces of the puzzle because of this need-to-know secrecy, how are we supposed to understand what's really going on?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it circles back to the core issue. These companies like Lockheed may be holding the keys to incredible technology while the government is all hush-hush and the public's left in the dark. It's this tangled web of power, and Elizondo's story tells us there's some real tension between corporate interests, this national security, and, just finding the truth. We're left with a lot of questions. What do these companies really know? How much of this tech is hidden from us? And who wins when these secrets stay buried? It's like we're peeking through a tiny crack into this whole hidden world, a world where technology is advancing in secret, possibly changing everything without us having a clue.
And to think that these private companies, they might be the ones calling the shots. That's a bit unsettling, isn't it?
For sure. Think about it. If companies like Lockheed really have this tech from UAPs, who do they answer to? Could they be making a profit from knowledge that should belong to everyone?
Elizondo seems to think so. He suggests the government might be passing the whole problem on to the private sector. Like they just don't know what to do with it.
He makes this really interesting comparison to the U-2 spy plane incident. Back when the U.S. got caught flying over Russia, violating a treaty and all that, Russia only made a fuss when they finally figured out how to shoot one down.
So basically they only acknowledge the problem when they can't ignore it anymore. Is that what's happening with UAPs too? Is the government ignoring this potentially revolutionary technology because they just don't know how to deal with it? Or is there even more to it than that?
Now that's the million-dollar question. Honestly, Elizondo's account raises way more questions than it answers. But one thing's for sure, we really need more transparency, more accountability, both from the government and from these powerful corporations.
Absolutely. And it seems like Elizondo's whole journey really highlights that struggle for transparency. He talks about all these roadblocks he hit within the Pentagon, and not just from the people worried about national security either.
Right.
He faced resistance from people whose, get this, religious beliefs actually influence how they saw UAPs.
Oh, yeah. Remember that story he told about his colleague, the one who said those UAPs could be demonic? It's just wild how deep-seated beliefs can impact even something that should be a purely objective investigation.
It does make you think, even in the world of science and intelligence, we're all human. We've got our own biases, right?
100%. It makes you wonder, what happens when you come across information that challenges your whole understanding of the world? Do you just cling to your beliefs even tighter? Or do you open yourself up to being challenged, maybe even changed by it?
Elizondo seems to be advocating for the second option. He thinks learning about UAPs shouldn't be a threat to faith. He actually thinks it might make us rethink our understanding of faith altogether. He even suggests that because the universe is so vast, it might actually make the idea of a higher power even stronger.
That's a really interesting perspective. It's like he's saying we shouldn't be afraid of what we don't know, but see it as a chance to grow and expand our minds.
And he's also concerned that the whole UAP topic could become a kind of religion itself. People blindly accepting information without actually thinking critically about it.
I can see why he'd be worried about that. It's super important to approach anything new, no matter how extraordinary, with a healthy dose of skepticism. We need to use those critical thinking skills. If we want to find the truth, we have to constantly question what we think we know and be ready to change our minds when new information comes along.
So how do we navigate this whole crazy situation, all this secrecy, corporate interests, and trying to figure out what's real?
I think Elizondo's own actions give us some clues. He really pushed for more transparency, working within the system while realizing how limited the government bureaucracy can be.
Yeah, like his Operation Interloper idea,
Yeah,
using an aircraft carrier as bait to try and capture a UAP. It's crazy,
right.
but it also shows he was willing to think outside the box.
Totally. It highlights that clash between trying to be innovative and the rigid ways the government makes decisions. And the fact that it got rejected in the end, it brings up some troubling questions.
Right. Like, are there other groundbreaking ideas being shut down because of bureaucracy and people keeping information to themselves? And what does that mean for, science moving forward and understanding the universe and all that?
Those are definitely questions we can't just brush aside. Elizondo's story, I think it shows there's a real problem with trust here.
Yeah, I see that. If the government and these big companies are operating so secretly, how can we trust they're doing what's best for all of us?
That's the heart of the matter. Elizondo seems to be advocating for a delicate balance, being transparent, but also keeping some things under wraps for national security.
Right.
He doesn't think we need to know everything, but he does believe we need to be more open and honest about what's going on behind the scenes.
I think he makes a really strong argument for an informed public, for democracy to really work, especially when we're talking about technologies that could totally change our world. People deserve to know what's being developed and how it might affect them.
Absolutely. This isn't just some abstract scientific debate. We're talking about the future of humanity here.
It's a lot to take in. And keep in mind, Elizondo's account is just one perspective on a very complex issue.
It is, but his experiences are a wake-up call for all of us. We need to demand more transparency from the people in power, both in government and in the private sector. And we need to seriously discuss the ethics of these new technologies that are emerging.
Elizondo really emphasizes that we shouldn't rely on him, or any single source for that matter, to get our information. He wants us to do our own research, to think critically, and to come to our own conclusions.
Powerful message right there. He's not trying to tell us what to think. He's trying to empower us to ask the right questions.
Which brings us back to that main conflict of interest we were talking about. Private companies like Lockheed potentially profiting from this groundbreaking technology while the government struggles with transparency and the public's left clueless.
And Elizondo's story, even with all its unanswered questions, makes us face this uncomfortable reality head-on.
It raises the stakes even higher, doesn't it?
No doubt about it. We're not just talking about some abstract theory here. We're talking about real-world consequences that could affect every single one of us.
So then, what do we do? How do we make sure these powerful people are held accountable and that the pursuit of knowledge isn't sacrificed for money or control?
That's something we need to dig into further, for sure.
It's like, I don't know, we're stuck. We want to know the truth about UAPs and all this advanced tech, but the very people who are supposed to protect us, well, their systems, they might be stopping us from getting the whole story.
It's a tough one, right? I mean, we need security, some secrecy, but when those things get in the way of, asking questions and scientific progress, then you got to ask yourself, are they really doing what they're supposed to be doing? In Elizondo, he seems to be saying we can find that balance, that we need some secrecy, but also transparency and accountability. Got to have both.
Yeah. He even goes so far as to compare how the government handles UAP information to, get this, how religious institutions used to suppress scientific knowledge. He brings up Galileo, how the church went after him for saying the earth goes around the sun.
Yeah, that's a powerful comparison, right? It really shows how dangerous it can be when dogma or these power structures tell us what we can and can't know, what we're allowed to explore. Elizondo is basically saying that searching for truth, whether it's scientific or spiritual, it should be about evidence, about thinking critically, not just sticking to what we already believe or, trying to control everything.
Makes sense. He also talks about how encountering these, extraordinary things, it can really mess with you psychologically, especially for people in intelligence. Imagine spending years dealing with information that just turns your whole understanding of reality upside down.
It's got to have some impact, right?
Oh, for sure. In Elizondo, he describes how his own thinking changed over time. He realized that what he was seeing, it couldn't just be explained away as, misidentifications or some natural phenomenon. He talks about how ATIP, they did everything by the book. They looked for the most basic explanations first before even considering something more, out there.
Right.
But the evidence just didn't fit. you know?
It happens.
Yeah, and he even mentions seeing these weird orbs of light in his own house right after he joined ATIP. He calls it a coincidence, but you can tell it really freaked him out.
Yeah, that'll do it. It just goes to show even the people who are supposed to be analyzing and understanding all this, they're still human, right? They feel awe, wonder, all that, same as anyone else when they encounter something they don't understand.
Totally. So let's get back to these private companies for a minute. If Elizondo is right, what are they actually doing with all this technology? Are they like reverse engineering it, making new things based on it, or are they just keeping it all locked away?
The whole idea of these potentially groundbreaking advancements being controlled by private companies, companies with their own agendas, profits to make, it's kind of a scary thought. And Elizondo, he's worried about how it could be abused, about the lack of transparency, about the fact that these companies might be so far ahead technologically that even the government doesn't know what they're doing.
It's wild. He even mentions a specific material, supposedly from a UAP, that a top aerospace company couldn't even copy. They tried, spent a ton of money, even broke $1 million machine trying to figure it out. It makes you wonder, what else is out there that we don't know about? What are they hiding?
Yeah. And who is all this secrecy really protecting? Is it national security, or is it corporate profits, or is it something else altogether?
Yeah, Elizondo seems to think that this whole UAP secrecy thing, it might be more about control than protection, Control of information, control of the technology, maybe even control of the whole story.
That's a disturbing thought. But when you look back at history, you see powerful groups often try to stay in control by limiting access to knowledge and resources, so it's not that far-fetched.
Right, yeah. And what about us, the public? Are we just like pawns in this big game,
Yeah.
kept in the dark while they decide what our future is going to look like?
Elizondo definitely seems to think that we have a right to know what's going on. He says we should be part of the conversation, that we need to hold those in power accountable. He wants us to actively seek knowledge, challenge what we think we know, and, well, use our critical thinking skills.
Yeah, he doesn't give us all the answers, but he wants us to ask the right questions. And that's probably the biggest takeaway from this whole deep dive, right?
Definitely.
We need to stay informed, be involved, and be skeptical. But more than anything, we need to keep asking questions, keep pushing for transparency, and demand answers.
Exactly. The truth is out there somewhere, whatever it may be. It might be hidden, might be complicated, even a little scary. But Elizondo's story shows us that it's worth searching for that truth, even if it takes us down some unexpected paths.
So there you have it, a little peek into the world of aerospace secrets, government programs, and the mystery of UAPs. We've explored this tangled web of power, secrecy, and the search for truth, and I think it's safe to say we have more questions now than when we started.
That's how these deep dives go, right?
Feel free to comment your thoughts or where you would like the conversation to go in a future cast. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. It really helps.